Hi. Today I thought I would do the book recommendation tag. I think it's kind of a bridge to cross when you start on BookTube. You have to do some kind of book tag, and this is one of the few that I found. So I thought I would do that. Before we get started, I do have to say this was a lot harder than I thought. It made me realize that I only recommend like the same 5 books. So yeah, I had to do some thinking for this, but it was fun, and if you take any of my recommendations into consideration, I hope you enjoy. I'll be looking down a lot because I have all my little questions on my tablet, so excuse me for lack of eye contact. Question 1. A book you tell people is your favorite. There is a lot, but the one that I picked for this would be Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson, and I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love this series. So the reason I picked the novella over the first book is because 1, the first book's answer to a different question, and 2, the novella was such a good wrap-up. If you do read the series, please do not skip out on the novellas. I'm not a novella reader, but it is so cute. There's action. Nathaniel is so funny in this book. Like, I was just giggling and kicking my feet as I was reading it because it was just so good, I promise. Question 2 is a book that is your guilty pleasure. And for my answer, I put Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma, and I gave this a 4.75 star. The reason I put this as my guilty pleasure is because I really do enjoy this rom-com. I've only read it once, but I definitely want to reread it at some point. But I think it's pretty well known that the smut is not great. There's a shower scene, which was, my god. So it's a guilty pleasure because although the book is cute, there's some questionable smut, in my opinion. So question 3 is a book that everyone loved but you didn't. So even though I didn't like this book, I wanted to put a book that I still know a lot of other people loved and that I feel could still be a good recommendation for certain types of people. So the book that I chose is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and I gave this 1 stars. If you don't know already, Sally Rooney is very much, you love her or you hate her, or her writing, I should say. But I did not vibe with the book whatsoever, but I do know a lot of people love it, so even though I didn't like it, I definitely would still recommend that you give it a shot. Who knows, maybe you'll like it. If you want a book that is no plot, just vibes, and young adults being in toxic relationships, that's kind of what I would describe this. But you know, there's a lot of people that love it, so definitely give this a shot if you want to. I don't like it though. Question 4 is a book you read the fastest. If you have not seen my name, I am a notorious slow reader. I don't read very fast. The most I've ever read is 200 pages in a day, and that is like if I dedicate my entire day to reading. On average, if I'm not busy, I read about 100 pages a day, but you know, as of late, I've been lucky if I hit 50 plus pages a day. So one of the books that I did end up reading the quickest was Shatter by Tahereh Mafi. I gave this 4 stars and I read it in 2 days. I'm like actually reading it. But then for audiobooks, the quickest I listened to a book was the Selection series by Kiera, and I listened to about a book a day. So those are definitely good books if you want to fly through them. I never ended up reading the rest of the series for Shatter. I know it's well loved, but I didn't feel like reading it and I don't like the narrator, so I'm just not picking it up again. As for the Selection series, I thought it was really fun. I went into it thinking I wouldn't like it, and it was really fun. I flew through it. It's easy breezy, but yeah, it's an easy fun read that you can really fly through. And the audiobook too, like I listened to it on 2 times speed because the narrator speaks kind of slowly, so it's easy to get through, and I definitely do recommend both. But Shatter I don't recommend listening to. The narrator to me sounds kind of like a child. Question 5, a book that deserves more hype. And that book would be the aforementioned Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, and of course I gave this a 5-star. It is so good. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is the perfect story. There's action, there is romance, there is humor, there is tension, there is good villains. A lot of people says it has Howl's Moving Castle vibes. I haven't watched the movie in a very, very, very long time, and I've never read the book, so I cannot confirm nor deny whether this is true or not, but Silas is perfect, Nathaniel is perfect, Elizabeth is perfect, everybody is perfect. We love them. I love Nathaniel. I love Silas. I want a white cat, and I want to name it Silas because of this book. It's truly so amazing. There's magical libraries, which I want to live in this world. There's wizards, magical libraries, and demons. Like, it's so good. Please read it, please. My God. And it's short. It's really not that long. It's like 500 pages, which that was long for me. When I read this, that was the longest book I'd ever actually read. But it is short for the amount of things that happen in this book. It is very action-packed. There are a couple of slow scenes that are really boring, but that's just to calm you down after a very tension-filled moment. But it truly is an amazing book. And honestly, spoiler, I recommend every book Margaret Rogerson has ever written. They're all 5 stars. She is an amazing, amazing writer. She is so talented, and I 10 out of 10 recommend them all. Question 6 is a book that is becoming a movie or a TV show. And of course, this was such an obvious choice. It would have to be Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is a 5-star. And it's actually the only Emily Henry book that I've given 5 stars, but I love it so much. The romance is so good and so beautiful, and both of the characters are dealing with trauma and situations, and watching them heal is so gorgeous. And it truly is just a very well-written, heartfelt book, and I don't have anything bad to say about it. The only thing that I didn't like was that it's not a real beach. There's not a lot of beach for a book called Beach Read. That's my only tiff. It's lakeside. It's not an ocean. I was imagining Florida or Hawaii or California, not a beach in Michigan. But it is fine. It is whatever. It is still very, very good, and it's minus 0.00001 points for it not being a real beach. But it is so good. I definitely want to reread it. Truly a 10 out of 10 book. 7, a book you have reread the most. So this is a toss-up between younger me and current me, because I've mentioned this before, but I never really read real books as a child and teenager. I read a couple, but I mostly read Wattpad, and then I only really started getting into real books in 2021 when I was gifted Shatter and I fell into book talk recommendations. Technically, the book that I have reread the most in my entire life would be a childhood favorite of mine, and that would be Love Struck by Rachel Wing, and I gave this 5 stars. And when I say I reread this the most times, I reread this 5 times back to back to back to back to back. I no longer have the book, which kills me. I don't know why I got rid of it, but there's that book, and then I know she came out with a different book called Star-Crossed, so I want to buy both. I'm on the hunt for them. I want them both, and I want to reread for the 6th time Love Struck, and then read Star-Crossed, even though I know I'm probably too old to enjoy them as much as I did, but it's just, I truly loved it so much. Love Struck was actually the first romance book that I've ever read, and it was just the perfect little story for preteen me. And then currently, from 2021 onwards, where I refound reading, my most read book would be The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood, and I gave that 5 stars as well. The reason I loved this book so much was because it gave me Wattpad vibes, but as a real book. I know that doesn't really make sense, but it gave me the same feelings that I felt when I was a teenager reading Justin Bieber and Andy Biersack fan fiction. It gave me that same feeling, but as an adult and without like the Wattpad vibes of it all. So that is why that earned a place in my heart so quickly. So as a kid, my favorite Wattpad trope was fake dazing. I aced it up. I would just go into Wattpad and type in bad boy, good girl, fake dazing and just read every book that came up for that. So it made me feel those same feelings as a kid, and I think that's really why it jumped into my heart again, because of just, I got to feel the way I did when I was a kid without having to reread books that I wouldn't enjoy currently. That being said though, I don't know if this is still a favorite, because after I found out it was Star Wars fan fiction, it kind of made me not like it anymore. I'm not a Star Wars fan, so knowing that just kind of put me off a little bit, but I guess we'll see when I reread it. Question 8. A book from a genre that you don't typically read. So for me, a genre that I hardly ever read is lit fic and then historical fiction. So for this question, I picked Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I gave it 4 stars. I definitely picked this up because Taylor Swift wrote a song for it, which, like, honestly, thank you, Blondie. It was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I listened to it, I didn't read it, but I would like to read it at some point. And I watched the movie. I knew I was gonna cry because I cried at the end of the book, but oh my god, I did not think I was gonna cry as hard as I did. I know, because I read the book first, several months before the movie came out, and then I didn't go to the cinema, so I waited for it to be on streaming services, and when it got onto Netflix, that's when I watched it. And I think the fact that I knew the ending was coming and that the movie follows the book so well, like, it just made me even more sad because I just knew what was coming, so I was crying before it even happened. But it is definitely, it's sad. It does have a happy ending-ish, but it is sad. If you are a crier, you probably will cry. But if you don't feel like reading it, at least watch the movie. It truly is a wonderful story. I do know a lot of people are not fans of Delia Owens, so if you're not a fan, I still recommend reading the book though. You can always borrow it from the library or you can buy it used, and then that way you're not necessarily supporting the author. But I truly do think that this is worth reading. I don't know about her other works, but maybe just separate the art from the artist for this book. Question 9 is a book that deserves all the hype it gets. And for this one I picked Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper, and I gave it 4.75 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I went into it completely blind. I just knew it was about a witch. She was gonna get payback. That is literally all I knew about it, and I cannot tell you, I was so pleasantly surprised when I found out it was an LGBT book. Gay witches, oh my god, perfect. Overall, the entire series is pretty good, but book 1 is definitely the best, especially, again, gay witches. Of course, we love gay witches. I really also liked, and this isn't a spoiler, it's on the back, but I really liked the fact that they were falling in love as they were guessing back at their mutual guy ex, who, in this book, is hateful. But yeah, it was fun, it was cozy, it was witchy. It is a good October read. It doesn't take place in October, I don't think. It's been a while since I've read this book. I think it might take place more during the summer, but if you live in a warmer climate, that might actually still be perfect if you want to get in the Halloween mood, but it's not autumn, or it doesn't feel like autumn where you are. But again, I read this book a long time ago. I could be completely wrong. It could be set in October. So take my advice with a grain of salt. That's what I'm saying. But really good book. Recommend it any time of the year. So book 10 would be a book you usually recommend when asking to give a recommendation. I don't really have friends or family in my life that read, so I don't really get asked for book recommendations a lot, to be perfectly honest. But that being said, a book I definitely would recommend if I were to be asked is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and I gave that a 5-star. So this was the first Christina Lauren book that I read, and to be honest, I did see it a bunch on TikTok and it never ever piqued my interest. I'm definitely I judge a book by its cover type of person, and for some reason the cover just didn't speak to me. Now I love the cover, but back then I just wasn't interested. And then one day, my boyfriend and I were in Barnes & Noble's, and he looked at me, he's like, I like this cover. I was like, oh, fine, I'll read the blurb. So I read the blurb, and I was like, oh, okay. And I went and I sat down, and I read the first chapter, and I really, really liked it. So I bought it. Actually, no, I didn't buy it. He bought it for me. He gifted it to me. Because I was like, I don't know. It sounds really good, but I've never been interested in reading it, and blah, blah, blah. So he got it for me as a gift, which was very nice of him. And I ended up really, really, really loving it. It's set in Hawaii, and Hawaii is one of my dream places to go. I've never been, I've only ever seen it in the movies, and it just absolutely looks stunning and incredible and gorgeous and amazing, and I would love to go. And it's set in Hawaii, the descriptions are amazing, they do a lot of fun activities, so that in itself was a win for me. And then also her and her love interest, they're both so likable. They definitely get themselves caught up in a bunch of different situations, which is really funny, but also like very anxiety inducing, because it's like, oh my god, how are you gonna get out of this? But yeah, it was really good. It was enemies to lovers, it was fake dating. It was really, really good, and this is another book that I really do want to reread so badly, and I think I want to try and reread it, or start rereading it, maybe at the beach or by the pool or something during summer. I think it'd be very fun and nice. I personally don't really like the heat, so I think romanticizing the summer is really gonna help me get through it. So yeah, I definitely recommend this book. It's very fun too. I think it's a very good beginner book because the smut is pretty tame. Like I don't remember having any issues with the smut. It's like, it's open door, but it's tame compared to other things that I read, such as Neon Gods. The characters are likable, the plot is good and well paced. It's pretty thick, but yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend. Question 11 is a book that has your favorite character, and that would be The Wicked King / Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, and I gave it 4 stars. And my favorite character was Carden. As you might have realized, I didn't mention The Cruel Prince, which is book 1 in the trilogy. I only mentioned book 2 and 3. That is because book 1 Carden does not exist in my mind. If you choose to take this recommendation and you read the trilogy, please know book 1 Carden is hateful and awful and terrible and should jump off a bridge. He's bad. He's bad. Book one is a lot. He was way too mean to Jude. I think it's a very popular opinion that book 1 went way too hard in the enemies part of Enemies to Lovers. But book 2 and book 3 Carden, we love. So if you take that recommendation, just keep that in mind. But I do have a couple of honorable mentions, which is for the ACOTAR series, I love Feyre. I think she is the best character in the entire series. I love her so much, and she deserves the world. And then another favorite character, which might be a bit more controversial, is Rysand. I know it's Rysand. I don't like that though. I am choosing to be wrong. And he's a fictional character, so I'm allowed to be wrong. If he was a real person, I would use his correct pronunciation. But I like Rysand better. That's just me, okay? But I know it's controversial. What he did in Silver Flames is not okay. I don't stand by it by any means. But personally, I have my opinions about Silver Flames that I won't get into, but all I'm going to say is I don't feel that Silver Flames was the best book in the series, and I feel like character motivations and characters' personalities just weren't necessarily accurate, I guess. I'm not getting into it. I'm not going to get into it, but just when I say Rysand, know that what happens in Silver Flames, I'm not like excluding that book. Pre-Silver Flames, Rysand is my favorite. Post-Silver Flames, I don't think about, honestly. And then another honorable mention would be Sorcery of Thorns. It would be Silas and Nathaniel. Silas is cutest, most adorable little demon. I want him to have the world. And then Nathaniel is so funny. He's the best love interest in the world, in my opinion. Like, he is soulmate material. He is just sunshine. We love Nathaniel. Question 12 would be a book you wish you could live in. I have a couple. So the first book would be Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. 5 stars. I already warned you. 5 stars. Margaret Rogerson. Amazing, gorgeous, beautiful. Love her. I loved Enchantment of Ravens because it is such a fairy tale. If you think back to when we were kids and there was like the little fairies with flower dresses and wings, and they lived in like these little nature worlds and in flowers and almost like fairytopia vibes, that is Enchantment of Ravens. That is the type of vibe that it gives, except obviously the fairies aren't the cute tiny ones with the wings, they're the yucky ones. But it's so gorgeously described, and specifically I want to live in the Autumn Court with Rook. Rook is another favorite book boyfriend, that's all I'll say. But it would be such a fairy tale, and I think it would be so beautiful to live in that world. And then the other choice would obviously be A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, 5 stars. And the only thing I have to say about that is, who doesn't want to live in Valoris that's read the series? Like, that's why I didn't put it as number 1. It's kind of like a basic choice, you know? We all want to go to Valoris. It seems gorgeous there, so that's all I'll say on it. Question 13, a book you thought you would hate but ended up loving. And for this book, I chose The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I gave that 5 stars. I originally never ever intended on reading this book, but my boyfriend, when we were in Barnes & Noble's, he picked it up and he was like, I think you'd like it, you should read it. And he has never picked a bad book for me. Whenever I'm in a reading slump or don't know what to read, I literally just tell him, go pick me something. He has always picked me very good books that I very much enjoy. So the only reason I ended up borrowing the audiobook from the library was because he recommended it, and I ended up really enjoying it. I thought the story was pretty beautifully written, and it definitely made me feel a little sentimental and heartfelt, and I definitely left the experience feeling a little bit more grateful, I guess, about being alive and living and just not taking for granted what you have, I guess. Check the trigger warnings. That's all I'll say. It does involve. But it is a good book. I definitely cried a little bit during it. It's a more heavy book, I will say that, but it's a fun read. It's a fun read. It's a heartfelt read, mostly, I would say. Question 14 is a book that made you cry. All of them. I'm joking. Not really. I cry very easily. I am a crier. It's bad sometimes. So before we get started with what book I picked, some honorable mentions are Sorcery of Thorns. I was sobbing my eyes out too at one point. A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin. I was, even though I had them spoiled to me, I was crying my eyes out at the end of those, especially A Court of Wings and Ruin. Oh my god. At that one part nearing the end, that if you read, you know what I'm talking about, I was sobbing reading it. So those are my honorable mentions, but the book that I did end up picking for a book that made me cry was All of Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So this is actually such a good book, and I think it's a trilogy. I know there's 3 books out. I don't know if there's going to be a 4th. I do want to continue the series, but the only issue is book 1 gave me such a book hangover. I was in a slump for a month or 2. It's a very good book. It is a fantasy. It's about tarot cards and witches and magic, but it is also one of those books that's very heavy. It does deal with LGBTQ issues, with the loss of a friendship, missing persons, anti-LGBT cults. So there's a lot of heavy topics. So it did kind of emotionally drain me quite a lot, and there were quite a few parts where I was crying. However, it handles those topics very well in my opinion. It is a very well written book, and it's one of those books where you forget you're reading because you just see everything in your mind, and I definitely do want to continue the series, but it is a heavy book. that will definitely cause you to cry, especially if you have a soft heart. And then last but not least, a book you wish you could reread for the first time. And for this one, I really tried to think of something unique again. I didn't want to give a recommendation that I've already spoken about or that has already been recommended by many people, but to answer the question truthfully, it is a series, and it is the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas. And the reason I picked this, even though it is so recommended, is because I read this entire series knowing what happens. I had the first trilogy massively spoiled for me, and in terms of Silver Flames, I had a lot of that spoiled for me as well. So if I could reread any book, I would want to reread that series with no spoilers, because again, there were certain points that even though I knew what happened, it still got me emotionally, but I would like to live through that book not knowing what happens. And the other reason I did pick this series, even though it's so much recommended, is because it is my favorite series. If anyone asks me what are good books to get into fantasy, I definitely will recommend this series as one of the first to read. But yeah, those are all of the questions. I will definitely go ahead and leave all of the questions down below if you want to read over some of them or do this yourself. Let me know if you have read any of the books I recommended, or if you're going to take any of my recommendations. I would love to hear if you do and what you think of them. Thank you. Bye.